There we go. And the genesis, you say?
Well, the genesis was about 1990 when I had, well, actually 89 during the earthquake. I just moved back to Niles. I've been living in Texas, and I moved on I Street over here, and just was getting involved with the community at the time, and I really liked the people here and everything. And I one day I was talking to a friend who I just made, and I was suggesting that maybe a community association would be great to deal with some of the issues that people were having that lived in the neighborhood and lived in the down or that were downtown businesses and that sort of thing. And so the community association idea, and he said, "Oh, there's a guy just lives down the street that's interested as well," and something like that. And so we all sort of uh, met up. A fellow was named Matt Edwards, and a fellow named Paul Washmar, who still lives here.
Mm-hmm.
And it, we decided to put together a community association, and I had friends, Nikki Boughton and others, that came in and were involved in the process. We met some folks from the city of Fremont, uh, Becky McLean, and a few others with redevelopment, and we decided that the community association was got together, but we decided that we needed more than that. And so Kelly McGowan, who still lives here, Kelly helped facilitate a brainstorming session, and we all put together what was the culmination of putting together the Niles Main Street Association, which was part of the National Main Street Association. We found this out through Becky McLean, the city of Fremont, and we started having meetings about it, and decided to try to put an application in, and it was quite involved. We had to go through quite a bit of stuff to figure out what Niles was about, and to form a baseline, if you will, about businesses and what what their needs were, and how we could grow the village a little bit, because it was really becoming kind of a bit of a downfall. And then things happened that were very controversial, which was the sidewalks of Niles. That was a huge effort on the Main Street to pull that together. We won our national Main Street acceptance, and we became a national Main Street program. We tried to get the rest of the city of Fremont, the other districts, historic districts, Centerville and Irvington, to participate in the program. We could have made it bigger at the time, but their business associations decided that that wasn't for them. And that was fine. We focused on Niles. We took money that was earmarked for the Villa Hill Mill, and we got that money pulled back into the village here, and we got funded the widening and the beautification of the Niles Boulevard, which would meant the undergrounding of all the light poles and the
That was
widening of the
huge.
sidewalks and all that. And it was quite an undertaking, very controversial
And the
time.
train station.
And one of the other things was getting the train station moved back in to Niles, because it had been moved out some years ago. And we really wanted to have that historic artifact back in our village. And that was an uphill climb. That was over several years of time to get that happen. And that had definitely evolved and did happen through the Niles Main Street folks. Alan Heyman was one of the keys to getting that done. There was so many people that were involved at that time. I think I sat on the board of Main Street for 10, 12 years or something like that. And I got all the way to vice president, but didn't quite get
Didn't quite make it to
didn't make the presidency
so,
there.
And there's two things I would say Niles is known for. One is the trains,
Right.
and the other is that guy right up there, Charlie Chaplin, and that's because of the silent film museum that we have here, and even the S&A Cafe, which you opened, the restaurant you opened. Tell us about the S&A studios that started here.
Well, in 1911, Bronco Billy pulled into town on a train. There was prodded how many cars were on the train, but in the cars were horses and all their equipment and their actors that they had, their film company that they had with them. they came into town. They met in the place right now. It's called the Nile Cafe, and at that time it was called something else. I'm trying to think of what it was, but anyway, that was the location. He met with the business owners in the town at the time, and he said, if everybody in this room will give me $10, I'll open up a movie studio right down the street. And they all looked at each other and thought, well, that sounds pretty good. So they all gave $10 to Bronco Billy, and sure enough, he built a.
He didn't go take it and gamble. He actually did what he said he was going to do. Okay.
No, he had a plan in mind. When he pulled in here, his train, he looked around and he saw the hills.
Yep.
And on the hills there were cows.
Mm-hmm.
And then the cows were being herded by real cowboys. And at the time, he was making Western films. He had come across the United States making Western films in Colorado and other places. And he thought that Niles was perfect for it. The weather here was fantastic.
Yep.
According to the almanac at the time, the Farmer's Almanac, that it had the most sunshine days of any place in the bay in this area, and it was perfect for filmmaking because they didn't have lights in those days, and so he started making films, started producing. Every 2 or 3 days he'd produce a film, and he started buying some property, real estate here in town, because in those days it was the beginning of the film industry, the very beginning.
Hollywood.
Yeah, and there's a we're sitting on 2nd Street, Niles, and just 2 blocks down is where the original studio which is near where Bobby Dalton and David Jacobs lived. In the back there was a great barn back there, and that barn was where they got their start. That's where they started making the films, and it wasn't too long after that they became world famous. They were shipping films all over the world, and they became very wealthy, and they built a huge studio, the largest studio in the world at the time, called the S&A Studios. And the S&A was standing for S, which was George Spohr, who was Bronco Billy's Anderson's business partner. Bronco Billy Anderson, the A, so it was S and A. Later they phonetically spelled it S&A.
Okay.
And so they put together a perfect formula for making westerns, and then they decided they wanted to get more into the soap opera serial thing, which was the early slapstick kind of comedy of the day.
Enter Charlie Chaplin.
And they paid Chaplin you can get that out.
Yeah. Handsomely.
There you go. They paid him. It was quite a sum for the time. It was would be like $1 million today, kind of thing.
Wow.
To come out from the East and make films, and he made The Tramp, which Charlie wrote and invented himself. And it was absolutely probably one of the most famous films in history.
I think so.
And it was made right here in Niles Canyon. And he made about 4 or 5 films after that here, and then decided he wanted to go south.
It was too boring here for him, I heard.
Yeah, the cows and the cowgirls were like, oh, it wasn't Charlie's.
He'd already run through what he needed to do up here, and he moved back south.
He was a big city boy and a cow picking town.
So speaking of movies, and now let's jump to music. And here I am. I'm sitting literally on your stage at your house that you have. You guys have concerts here. You've built this fabulous. You have concerts and parties, and there's Scully. Go back to Lorna here. Yes. And so music in the park, music downtown. You are a music man as well.
Yeah, and this ain't River City.
You are the most the most storied man, I would say, here in Niles.
I like that. That's a storied man. There's a song.
There you go.
You could do this. You could do a play on. It takes a worried man. You could think it takes a storied man to sing.
There you go. Wait, so I'm gonna